Hi, Misha here, and in the past I've talked about the Lockheed T-33 Shooting Star, the two-seat trainer version of the P80, later F-80 Shooting Star, and in those videos I showed a couple of models from Vulcan, which is no longer in business, and I've been looking for a P80 model, single-seat model, and this is the best I've found so far in diecast. This is from postage stamp, so it's a very basic but inexpensive model. It's purported to be 180 scale, so quite close to 172, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's more like 187 scale. It seems a little small for 180, but it's hard to tell because this was physically a smaller aircraft than the T-33. Anyway, with that said, since I have at least something to show for a P80, I thought I'd do a short little video, because this is an important aircraft in American aviation history, if not in world aviation history. This was the U.S. Army Air Forces, later U.S. Air Forces, first operational jet fighter. It wasn't their first fighter, per se. That actually goes to the Bell Aero Comet, which first flew on October 1st, 1942, known as the P-59. And this was scheduled for full-rate production, but a few things happened. For one, it was not performing very well. In fact, it struggled to get much over 400 miles per hour. Even in 1942, that wasn't stellar. Piston aircraft could do that. Then, in 1943, news of Germany's test flights of the Messerschmitt Me-262 came to the Allies, and America knew they had to up their game. On top of that, they knew, of course, about the British development. So basically, the American aerospace industry was ordered to catch the hell up. And Kelly Johnson, later of Skunk Work fame, of Lockheed, told he could do the job in 180 days. He lied. He did it in 143 days. So from July of 1943 until that fall, he worked on an airframe, and for the engine, they based it on a sample of the British Goblin. And the first Goblin they had actually was destroyed, so a second one had to be flown over. That delayed the program a bit, but it was well underway, and the first XP-80 prototype flew on January 8th, 1944. So, pretty damn quick. It's a pretty conventional aircraft, straight wing, but unlike the Messerschmitt or the Meteor, it was the first to have the engine in the fuselage instead of hanging off the wings, which obviously had some advantages. Well, after the XP-80, next came the XP-80A, which was a larger, heavier, more powerful version. It was also more dangerous. Several people were injured in test flights or just outright killed in 1944 on the two XP-80A prototypes. But in August of that year, it went over 500 miles per hour, which is a pretty good milestone. Now we're getting into some real jet speed. So with that, 12 pre-production YP-80s were ordered. And these are quickly made ready by Lockheed. And of these, 4 were sent over. 2 would go to the UK. 1 would be basically loaned permanently to the British for all their help with the Goblin engine. The other one would be tested by the US and Britain. And 2 more would be stationed in Europe, starting in late 1944, early 1945. However, there was an engine fire that killed a pilot in January of 1945, so the fleet was temporarily grounded, but this did not keep them down for long. By April, the Air Force had its initial order for 344 in with Lockheed, and they're planning to buy 5,000. Also, the two pre-production models in Europe at the time were used for reconnaissance duty in late February and into March over Italy. So this actually means it did go into service, if not combat, before the end of World War II. And of course, they learned things from the pre-production models, and the full production P80A shooting star was being made ready. Its biggest change really was it added these wingtip fuel tanks. Later on, it would be supplanted in service by the P80B, which introduced an ejection seat. And then in 1948, the ultimate version, the P80C, would come out with an uprated engine, larger fuel tanks, and again that ejection seat is standard. And there was also I should just say now, in 1948, after the Air Forces were independent, becoming the U.S. Air Force, they renamed P from Pursuit to F for Fighter, and thus in 1948, this became the F-80C. And there was also an RF-80C photo reconnaissance version. Backtracking a bit, after the war in the European theater was over, that summer, the U.S. Navy received its first P-80s. Now, it had its own jet fighter programs, but it wanted to evaluate what the Air Force was cooking, and outfitted a couple for carrier trials. These were loaded onto the USS Franklin Roosevelt in October of 1946 and began trials at the end of that month. The Marines also took place, and it was good that this happened because the Navy's program was having some delays, and so they ended up getting 50 F-80Cs from the Air Force for training to kind of keep their jet skills up until their own planes are ready. Of these, 25 would be active in the Navy and 16 active in the Marine Corps, and the rest just kind of held back for reserves. And they would be very popular. In fact, so much so that the Navy would end up purchasing nearly 700 T-33s for their use in the Marine Corps, the two-seat trainer. Originally in the Navy, this was known as the TO-1, then TV-1, and the T-33 would be the TV-2. But that's a story for another day. In the Air Force, this was first deployed to West Germany in 1946. Later, it would be deployed to Japan, and it would be used during the Berlin airlift. But of course, it's probably most known for its use very early on in the Korean War. These were among the first fighters the Allies NATO sent in 1950. And starting off, they did well because they were up against propeller-driven planes like Yaks and Ilyushins. But then, of course, the MiG appeared. And this was no match for the MiG. Specification-wise, this is about a 34.5-foot long plane, wingspan with the tanks of just under 39 feet. Maximum speed is just shy of 600 miles per hour for the F-80C variant. Max altitude is a little over 46,000 feet. It had, for standard armament, 6 50 caliber machine guns, 300 rounds per gun. And under the wings, it could carry either 2 1,000-pound bombs, as on this model, or up to 8 unguided aerial rockets, which is actually good because it gave it a second life. On November 1st, 1950, a Soviet pilot flying a MiG-15 claimed that he shot down an F-80. If true, this would be the first jet-on-jet victory, although the Allies deny it. Reciprocally, on November 8th, an F-80 pilot claims he shot down a MiG-15, and the Soviets deny it, so you really don't know. But the MiG was faster, more maneuverable, lighter, had cannon, and was pretty much a pure dogfighter. What held the F-80 back were its straight wings, which when it was designed were very standard for propeller aircraft. But the MiG-15 was designed with the wing sweep, and the reason the Soviets did that, they were using late war German research. They'd found that swept wings had many advantages in jet aircraft, especially as you approach the speed of sound. While the MiG and the Shooting Star were both firmly subsonic, the MiG still was much faster than the Shooting Star. So, by December, around Christmas of 1950, F-80 units started transitioning over to F-86s, which were rushed into production. And kind of ironically, the reason the F-86 was a little bit delayed in getting into service is it was being retrofitted with swept wings. I shouldn't say retrofitted, but the design during the testing phase was set up with the swept back wings. So America recognized the benefits. So after this, the F-80s were mostly used for ground attack missions, close air support, or the F-80, or I should say, sorry, RF-80. You can tell I don't edit these. RF-80 was used for photo reconnaissance, and those would continue through the end of the war. But even the ground attack missions would soon be replaced, for the most part, by the newer F-84 Thunderjet. So really by 1952, the F-80 was out of frontline service in Korea. There still were squadrons in Japan there for defense, and these were transferred stateside for training. And of course, they were used by the Air National Guard for some time. But production had ended in 1950. This was the plane of World War II, and it was being outclassed by a couple of newer generations. Like I said, originally the Air Force planned to buy 5,000, but this order was cut to 2,000 following the end of World War II. Ultimately, just over 1,700 would be built by Lockheed. Most were either of the F-80C, or if they were older planes, they were updated to the new F-80C standard. And really, by the mid and late 50s, this was out of American service. Although a couple of allies probably flew it a little longer. However, more importantly for history, this gave birth to the T-33, which was a much more successful design, quite ironically. It's also a higher performing plane. But that's a story for another video. As far as this postage stamp model, not a whole lot to say. These are very fixed models. They don't have gear up or down, canopies opening, and like I said, they're a little bit smaller than I'm used to, but they did come with a decent stand, and they are very heavy. I will give them that. They are truly metal, and they do have plastic to simulate the glass cockpit. So for like $15, they're decent placeholders. They're like the Corgi Showcase. They make them to fit the box. They don't make them to any particular scale. That's why when I say they say it's 1 in 80, it seems more like 1 in 87 to me, but who am I to know? But yeah, for the little money, it's good. I wish Falcon had done the P80, F-80. This would have also been another one for SkyMax to do, because they did the F-84. But, yeah, take what you can get. But since this is important to American history, I had to show a little video on it. Hope you enjoyed it. Any questions or comments, please do post them below. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon. Next time.